Okay. So, hello everyone. Welcome to another MS Excel Toronto Meetup group session. We are in October 2023. For those of you who are new, this meetup group started in 2019, and I'm going to mute everyone so that we don't have echo. Okay. When we join, sometimes we forget to verify audio and video. So, like I was saying, this group is already 4 years old, I guess. And initially, we were meeting in person, like in the old good days. But after the pandemic, we started to run sessions online. All those sessions have been recorded. We have a lot of content in our YouTube channel. This session will also be recorded and will be available there in a few days. Also, for those of you who recorded the session, who replied yes to the session, will receive an email. As long as you didn't opt out from emails on Meetup platform, you will receive an email from us saying, here's the link, here's the file that the presenter Mark Proctor will share with us, and a couple of other items of information related to next events and things like that, and Excel resources. So the point of this group is always to share knowledge about Excel. Excel is such a wide, vast tool that can be used in so many ways, and it's connected now to more and more other tools. So anything related to Excel, we try to bring here. Every month is a different presenter, a different topic, and anyone can apply to present and share with the rest of the community. So today we have Mark Proctor. He happens to be the third time that Mark is sharing the vast amount of knowledge he has in Excel, and it is always an awesome session. So I'm guessing today won't be any different. We will present them. I will present him in a minute. Just a couple of announcements. So you know that the session is being recorded, and if you have any problems with Teams, just try to log out and come back. Sometimes chat does not work and things like that. We are recording. Be mindful of that. Your participation either on video, on audio, or the chat might be recorded and will be uploaded into our to our YouTube channel. We have the next session already scheduled. The page is not up yet, but it will be very soon, so keep an eye so that you can register. We will have Steve Krynak, who is a former member of the Excel team. He worked at Microsoft in the Excel team for many years. He now works as a consultant, and he will be presenting about ChatGPT and Excel. It is a topic, whether or not you like it, everyone needs to learn about it sooner or later. So looking forward to this session, and I hope you can join us too. We have a couple of Excel events happening in the next few months. The very first one, the next one is happening next week. I will be presenting there about dynamic array functions. And this Excel event, Excel Virtually Global, has happened for 8 years already and is free to attend. You can just donate to a charity of your preference. There's a website there. Feel free to take a look and see if you want to attend and take advantage of all the free content. There's the Financial Modeling World Cup going on. October 6th is the due date for registration, $50. And then there will be, and I apologize, I do not have it ready here, but I will send it on the email. There will be the finals event in December, and it combines the finals themselves with master classes. It will be in Las Vegas, and you can also register there. That's a higher ticket event, but it might be a very good one to attend, and especially very fun. So I will send that information out on the next email that about this session. If you are interested, look for it. There will be a discount coupon there that you can use. And the Global Excel Summit is going to its third or fourth edition now in 2024. It will be only February, but early bird registrations are already available. So if you want to take advantage with a coupon for 10%, you can use Celia 10. And Grania is going to paste the link there. There's a link here at the bottom that you can click to get you can click that link so that you will be using my affiliation link, and the coupon code Celia10 is what you need to apply on checkout. Okay, next. That's it for now for events. There are other meetup groups around the world. You can check on LinkedIn. Follow for us, Shaik. We usually have a list of the events for the month, but for some reason this month we don't have it. Just take a look at his profile on LinkedIn. It will be up soon. Also because our session happened very early in the month this time. And there's a lot of couple more resources. There's a newsletter that I send out every month. If you are interested in knowing what's going on with Excel, there's a lot of different, there's new features every month, improvements or new features. Just yesterday, we got a new feature. We now have checkboxes. So finally, we are able to put in checkboxes within cells in Excel. That's the most recent one. And I always send out the news once a month only about the new improvements. So if you are interested, feel free to register. This information will also be on the email that I send out after the session. There's a YouTube channel with a lot of content. All the sessions from these past almost 4 years have been uploaded to YouTube, and there are some incredible sessions there. Okay, my training program about how to automate Excel reporting procedures from end to end is available too. You can register. Same thing, information will be available on the email. And that's it for now, because we are here to hear from Mark. So Mark Proctor is an MVP. He's been contributing to the community in different ways. One of them has been his website that for me has been useful many times with different content, not only about PBA, but also Excel in general. I recognize Mark for being a very thorough and detailed professional writer. When he explains something, he goes end to end with all the details. So his content is very good and reliable, and it's one of the main sources I use on a daily basis, almost when I need to find out something that I don't have from the top of my head. What else, Mark? What am I missing? Mark used to work as an accountant, if I'm not mistaken, but he will be able to confirm that later. But now, about a year ago or so, went on a solo entrepreneurship journey. He also has a training about automation with Excel, which I do recommend. He will talk about that, I'm sure. And so the floor is yours, Mark. Thank you so much for coming again. I know it takes a lot of effort and time and dedication to prepare a presentation, and we all get to take advantage of that for free. So thank you so much for your dedication. And the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me? I assume so. Let me just share my screen. I'm share that screen there. Let me just move some things around here, because obviously so when you do these things, you really want like 6 screens. So hopefully I've got enough screens up. I can see what's going on. Right. Apart from the fact I'm on the wrong slide, so let's go back to the start. That would help. And now let's try that again. Right, so today we're talking about how to build an automation machine. If you want to work along with the main example that we're working through, you can see there is a link there, which I'm sure Gronya or someone can put into the chat as well for you to download and work along with. So we will be working through, there's some example files there. If you've got any questions, by all means, put them in the chat. We will be about just over an hour in terms of content. So what I suggest is if we leave any questions until the end, unless there's anything that's really pressing that I've clearly misled you on or clearly made a mistake on. So let's make a start. How to build an automation machine. So my goal today is really to show you that an Excel-based automation machine is the key to quickly building automation processes. And we're going to look at how we build an automation machine in this session. So that's my goal. An Excel-based automation machine is the key to quickly building automation processes. So yes, I'm still a chartered accountant. So qualified 18 years ago. I now work as a reporting automation consultant, and I do training. And we work primarily with Excel and Power BI. I'm a Microsoft MVP. You can see my contact details there. And then I have a website, exceloffthegrid.com, a YouTube channel. So feel free to check those out. So this topic is a really special topic to me because it has quite an important meaning in my life as a whole. Back in 2015, I started a new job, which was great. Apart from the fact that the hours were absolutely killing me, I would regularly have to work till 9:30, 11:30. Month ends, forecast, core ends. It was just relentless. It just kept going. So I realised this isn't me. He's a man with brown hair and a beard, but equally these pictures represent how I felt about it. It was exhausting, and this was kind of my scenario. Well, I decided that I had to learn how to automate Excel. So I started looking at macros and VBA. I'd looked at macros a bit before I knew a bit, but now I really had to work with them. And I got some initial success. It was fantastic. I was starting to automate processes, starting to save some time. It was all going well. That was until we suddenly had to make changes and update things. There's always new departments, new people, new reports, new scope, all these other things. And suddenly what went from being fantastic time saving was just a pain in terms of management. How do we handle all these changes and different versions for this and different versions for that? So all that time that I'd originally saved was now being sucked up by trying to manage all this automation that I had created. But that's when I had this idea. The idea was that I'd built these tools that were based around, so I had several quite large tools that all worked together. I had an idea that was more based around how Lego works. So rather than building large tools, what we do instead is we build a lot of small tools and then we kind of clip them together or use them together just like you would with Lego bricks. Now, I don't know how many different shaped Lego bricks there are. There might be 100 or so, but equally you can clip them together in almost any way. Yes, there's different colors, but equally there's a limited number of Lego bricks, and how you clip them together, you can then build almost anything. And the idea was that if we can do this with VBA, that we can create these small programs that you put them together however you want, in whatever order you like, and you can automate almost anything. So that was the idea. I then went to implement this. This was my automation machine, as it were. And there is what I would have looked like, I'm sure at the time, happy and smiling, because I then managed to get back all of this automation time, the concept of when changes happened and other issues and new departments and everything else. It wasn't an issue because I built the tool correctly and had this flexible tool that I could use. And so in the end, rather than being this grumpy man who was always at work, it meant that I could actually have some free time. I wasn't stressed at weekends. I wasn't thinking about work all the time. Suddenly I got back to a normal life. Now, as I said, this, while I went through this process, actually going through this and building out this automation machine in honesty, this whole thing has changed my life completely. There's us on holiday. There's my kids looking shocked that they got to spend some time with their dad. But that's just to show the fact that this has changed my life, my outlook on so much stuff. And actually, it's not just about Excel, but about how we think about problems in general. So that's kind of my story. Now let's just take a step back and give some of this some context. So there's a book by Gary Keller. It's called The One Thing. And in this book, he says, if you can ask, answer, and action, I think it is, this one question, then it leads to extraordinary results. And the one question is, what's the one thing you can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? So what's the one thing you can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? So if you can ask, answer, and action that question, then suddenly you start to create these extraordinary results because you start removing tasks or making tasks a lot easier. Now, for me, and I imagine for a lot of you, the answer to this question is automating Excel, because if we can automate Excel, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary. However, I, much like probably many of you, fell into the standard definition of automation. This is how it goes. I spend a lot of time on this task. Should I write a program automating it? And we have this dream of where we, so we've got work and then time on the bottom, and we originally might have to write some code, but then the work takes, or the automation takes over, and then we get this free time. The reality is often very different. I mean, what happens is we spend the time writing the code and then debugging and then rethinking ongoing developments and everything else, and we have no more time for the original task. And what we build for ourselves is more work than we ever had before. Now, I don't know whose image this was originally. If anyone knows, I'll happily give credit to them. So that's what often automation looks like. And that's because we're missing one other question. And the other question we need to ask is, what would this look like if it were easy? Okay, if Excel automation were easy, what would it look like? We've already decided that automation is what we need to go for, but now we need to make it easy. And that's why this automation machine concept is so important. Now, in the context of what we're looking at today, there's kind of three major uses for Excel. There's application or data storage, there's reporting analysis, and then there's modeling and forecasting. Now, the reason why I break these out is because how we use Excel for these three tasks differs slightly. So how we use Excel for application and data storage is different to how we use Excel for reporting and analysis. And it's different to how we think about modeling and forecasting. The tools are the same, it's the same formulas, the same methods, but how we think about those problems, how we lay out those problems, and how we solve those problems are very different. Now, often these three will cross over with each other, but today we're primarily thinking about this section here, reporting and analysis. So that's where we're spending our time in terms of solutions. Now, I want to bring into your thinking there's a few kind of frameworks or tools or concepts that I want to bring to your attention first. And the first one is the concept of a repeatable framework. To give you a simple example of what a repeatable framework is, here's a question. How do you get to the Eiffel Tower? Now, I'm assuming that you're not in France at the moment, but you're somewhere else. How do you get to the Eiffel Tower? Well, you start by arranging your travel documents, you drive to the airport, you fly to the country, you get the local transport, and then you walk. Okay, that's how you get to the Eiffel Tower. But what happens if you don't want to go to the Eiffel Tower? What happens if you want to go to the Empire State Building? Well, you arrange the travel documents, you drive to the airport, you fly to the country, you get the local transport, and then you walk. What happens if you don't want to go to the Empire State Building? What if you want to go to the Colosseum in Rome? Well, you arrange your travel documents, you drive to the airport, you fly to the country, you get the local transport, and you walk. What about the Sydney Opera House? It's exactly the same steps. So yeah, the travel documents that we need are different. The airport that we drive to might be different. The terminal that we fly from might be different. The type of local transport we might get might be different, but equally, it's a repeatable framework. It's the same steps that we take over and over again. Now, there are other ways we could do this. We could take a boat from wherever we are, and we could, or a ship, a container ship, we could get on a container ship and sail there. You know, there's other options, but equally, These 5 options get us to almost any landmark in the world. This is a repeatable framework for getting to major landmarks. Now, do we have a repeatable framework in Excel for solving reporting and analysis problems? Often the way we use Excel, you'd think the answer would be no, but the answer is actually yes. And we call this our reporting and analysis blueprint. So in this, there are 7 steps. The first step is input. So we need to know where our input is. It might be in folders and drives or even in a database. We then take that input and then we reshape it, and we reshape it using Power Query. And then we place that into a data layout. And that might be a table, it might be the pivot cache, it might be the data model, it might even be a Python data frame. We then calculate on that data. We might use formulas or pivot tables or DAX or Python code. We then visualize that. So we take our inputs, we reshape them to data, we calculate on that data to create some form of visualization. It might be a tabular layout, a chart, some other visualization, or even a Python visualization. Step 6 is when we present. Present is about taking those visualizations and then placing them into whatever format we want to present in. So it might be a dashboard, it might be a PowerPoint presentation, it might be a Word document. And then finally, we then distribute whatever that happens to be. Now, for a lot of these steps, we can use Excel, but equally, we might have to work with files and folders and databases. Also, we might have to work with PowerPoint and Word and Outlook and SharePoint, or even just printing things out and giving documents to people physically. So that's the process that we go through. Often we get very confused, or people get very confused about this input, calculate, visualize step. They merge it all together, they mix their presentation with their calculation, and it causes a mess. The key point is that we want to go from input to reshape it into a data layout. We then calculate on that data layout to create a visualization. That's the correct order in which we need to undertake that. So that's the repeatable framework. There's another concept I want to bring to your mind, and that is the concept of a refreshable process. Now, normally we think about processes in terms of we run a process. The process runs from start to finish. But with reporting analysis, if we think about finance, we often work through, we get to our first visualize stage, we find out we need to post a journal. So that journal ends up going back into our input stage, and then we want to refresh again. So we want to refresh several times through our process. Whenever there's a change, we want to refresh through. So what does this refreshable process look like? Well, it starts by controlling our inputs and our documents. Then we use something that we call the Automation Toolkit. This is what we're referring to as our automation machine. And that's what we're going to build in a few moments' time. From that, we can kick off our Power Query refresh, that then in turn will then kick off our calculation and pivot table refresh. This steps 1 to 5, as I said, we get from step 1 to step 5. This is when we can add real value as people. This is when we reconcile and analyze and gain insight. We might even need to adjust those numbers. So that then feeds back into our input stage. And then we loop around this input to visualize stage over and over again until we've completed all the elements that we need to. At that point, we can then put everything together into a presentation format that we can then distribute. And you see at the end, we have this automation toolkit. That is our automation machine. So that is the part that we're looking at primarily today. So that's the context of what we're working with and how we think through these processes. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this in the 3 main headings. So we've got how to build an automation machine. We're going to do that live. We're then going to look at how that relates or integrates with Power Automate. And then third, we're going to look at what's possible. How far can we push this concept of an automation machine? So let's make a start with building an automation machine. Now, this is where our demo files come in. So if you want to download those and work along, then please do. So this is the process that we've got. We've got some Excel files. Those Excel files are going to come through Power Query, and that's then going to create our report. And we want to create a PDF version of our report. So let's just take a brief look at these files. So if you've downloaded them, you should have I got this open already? Nope. Let me open this up. So you should have the inventory reports. So you've got 4 of those. And if I open up one of those files, you'll see that all this is just effectively it's a stock report. As at that date, it's just a list of what stock we happen to have on hold and what category it happens to be in. We then have our monthly inventory report. So this uses Power Query to pull in whatever data we need. So you'll see here we've got our reporting date. So our reporting date is the parameter that we use. That then feeds into our folder path. So if you're working along with this, you will need to change this cell here, this file path, so that it points to the files on your PC. So that's the file path we use. We then use Power Query to pull that in. From there, we then calculate on that, and then we create our visualizations and our report. So that's the example file that we're going to be working with. As I said, we want to build out our automation machine. Now, there's one other concept or one other technique that I want to bring to your attention as we start building this out. So a few years ago, I was on a call with Charlie Young. He runs engineerexcel.com. We were talking about VBA courses. And he was setting up a course about engineering, and it had a VBA course for engineers with user-defined functions. And I was explaining to him my thoughts around VBA and how it works and how I structure things. And he said, that sounds just like the Unix philosophy. So, of course, I told him how wise he was, what a very astute understanding. I agreed with him, obviously. And then after that call ended, because I really had no idea what the Unix philosophy was, I went straight to the internet and Googled it and found out what the Unix philosophy was. And I thought, you know what, Charlie Young, he is wise, he is astute. But now I knew that for a fact rather than just saying it because I didn't know. So the Unix philosophy has, it's effectively boils down to 3 key points. And the 3 key points are we want to write programs that do one thing and do it well. We want to write programs that work together, and we want to write programs that handle text streams because that is a universal interface. Now, if you've used Unix in the past, people often say, oh, Unix is rubbish, Unix is terrible. Have you ever used it? But the key point is not about Unix, it's about the philosophy that we're going to work through and see how we can apply that to our automation machine. So we want to write programs that do one thing and do it well. We want to write programs that work together and write programs that handle text streams. So let's think about how we might apply this. So we're going to build out our automation machine, okay? We've got our machine. Our machine is going to have lots of cogs and steps in it. And these are going to do one thing and do one thing well. Our first piece of our machine is simply going to open up Excel. The next piece of our machine is simply going to change a cell value. So that's going to change that date that we had in our example file. The next piece of our machine is going to refresh Power Query. The next piece of our machine is going to save the Excel file, then save a PDF, then close Excel. So in all, we're going to have 7 programs. We're going to have 1 program for each of these steps, and then we're going to have our overall automation machine program. So let's see how we can build this. I'm starting off with let me close this file. I don't need that one open. So here I've got a file. It's called automation machine example.xlsm. It's currently blank. There is nothing in it whatsoever. If I come to Visual Basic, I've created 1 module in there, but that is the only thing that is currently in there. So there's no code or anything else. So if we want to build our automation machine, the first thing we need to know is, much like when we travel to anywhere in the world with that repeatable framework, we need to know what are the things we need to be able to complete our journey. So for this, there are 4 pieces of information that we need. We need to know the folder path of the file that we want to open. We need to know the file name of the Excel workbook. So folder path is the folder, the file name is the file name of the Excel file. We need to know what the PDF name is. What do we want to save our PDF as? And what date do we want to use for our report? So we've got our 4 key pieces of information. And there's actually 5, there's actually 6, but we're going to stick with these 4 for now. So the first thing we need is, where is our Excel file that we want to open? So that is here. It's called our monthly inventory report. It's in my support files folder. So I'll paste that in there. I'll put a slash at the end. We then need to know what the Excel file is that we want to open. That's here, monthly inventory report. So we'll paste that up there. We then want to know, right, what's the name of the PDF that we want to save? I'm going to just change this to .pdf. Let me just zoom in a bit here so you can hopefully see better. And then the date, let's do the 31st of August 2022. So the example files cover August, September, October, and November 2022. So now we've got kind of some key piece of information that we need to pass throughout our repeatable framework. The next thing is, well, what steps do we want to undertake? So I'm going to create a column called action and one called parameters. We pull that across. So the first step we wanted to undertake was to open, and we wanted to open an Excel workbook. So if we want to open an Excel workbook, there's 2 pieces of information we need. We need to know the folder path and then also the file name. So that will then open up whatever file and file path we give it. Then we wanted to change a cell value. Now, once we open up an Excel workbook, we can only have one Excel workbook open with that name. So to change a cell value in Excel, we need to know what the workbook name is. We need to know what the sheet name is, that's settings. We need to know what the cell is that we want to change, that's this cell up here, that's called reporting date. And we need to know what value we want to put into that cell. So to change a cell value, we just need 4 pieces of information. So I'm going to call this change cell. And the 4 pieces of information we need, as I said, are the file name. The second piece that we need was the worksheet name. That was settings. The next piece of information we need was the name of the cell. That was called reporting date. And then finally, we had the value that we wanted to put into that. So the final value would be our date. We just put some word wrap on here, or some text wrap. There we go. So our steps were to open an Excel file, change the cell value. We then want to refresh our Power Query. So we'll call that refresh data. Now, what information do we need if we want to refresh everything in our workbook? We only need the name of our file. Spelled refresh wrong. There we go. Next, we wanted to save our Excel workbook. So if we want to save an Excel workbook, what information do we need? We just need to know the name of our file. Next, if we want to save a PDF, what information do we actually need? We need to know the workbook that we want to work with, the sheet name that we want to save as a PDF, and the file name that we want to save our PDF as. So we're going to go our file name. Then we want the sheet name we want to save as a PDF. That's going to be report. And then finally, we want our name, the name of our PDF. And that's going to be, if I get these the right way around, our folder path and our PDF file name. Then finally, we want to close our Excel workbook, and the only information we need for that is our file name. Now, you wouldn't necessarily think about a problem in this way, but this is just so we can kind of break up this solution into clear parts. So starting off by saying, right, what are the steps we want, and what's the information that we need to pass to be able to complete these steps? Get some. Right, so we now know what information we want to pass across. Let's go and build out our individual machines, or our individual cogs, as it were. So if we want to create something, a simple program that does one thing and one thing well, we want to create our first program is a program that opens an Excel workbook. Now I'm going to write this code out by hand. You could use the Excel, you could use the VBA macro recorder, you can use ChatGPT. I'm just going to write it by hand, A for speed, because it will help us kind of build up this process. And hopefully we'll work through the code so that will help you to understand that as well. So if I want to open up an Excel workbook, I'm going to call this sub workbook open. Now, which workbook do I want to open? Well, I want to pass across at some point whatever value is in cell C8. So that's going to come across, and we're going to call that workbook path. Now, if you remember, we want to handle everything as a text string. So we can call it as string. So that means that when we run our cog of workbook open, it's going to accept workbook path as a variable, and it's then going to run workbooks.open. And for that, we need the file name parameter, and we're going to use our workbook path. Now, in simple terms, that's it. Okay, that is the VBA code for opening up an Excel workbook. Yes, there's more parameters we could use, and we'll look at some of those a bit later. But for now, in simple terms, that is the simplest block that we could create, the simplest cog that we could create for opening up an Excel workbook. Okay, how about the next step? We want to change a cell. So sub change cell. Now we said that there are 4 pieces of information. We need the workbook name, we need the sheet name, we need the name of the range, and then we need the value itself. So that means we actually need 4 parameters that we're going to pass across in here. So workbook name, that will be a string. We then want the sheet name, that will be a string. We need the range name, that will be a string. And finally, we need the value, and that will be a string. So how do we change a cell value? In simplest terms in VBA, we start with workbooks, and then we use our workbook name. We then reference our sheet, so that's sheets, and we use our sheet name. Then we use our dot range, and we use our range name. And then we set the dot value. We're going to set that equal to whatever the value we've got there. So all we've done is passed each of our parameters into this cog. We've passed the workbook name, the sheet name, the range name, and then the value, and then we've then applied them in our single line of VBA. So in its simplest term, without any error checks, without anything else, that is how we can change a cell value. How about if you want to refresh a query in Power Query? I'll call this sub refresh data. And for this, we just need the workbook name as string. And we're going to use workbooks. We're going to pass in our workbook name. And we're going to refresh all. Okay, so we've now built our third cog. We're going to bring all these cogs together shortly, don't worry. But in its simplest terms, that's how we can refresh all the connections in Excel. How about saving our Excel workbook? I'm going to call this workbook save. And then we're going to go, we just need the workbook name, and then we change the method on the end there to save. How about PDF save? How do we save a PDF? Now, this is the one where you probably do need to use the macro recorder because it's one of those ones which isn't as straightforward. But we're just still going to code it by hand. You can use the macro recorder. It will give you the code for this. I'm going to call this PDF save. So for this, we need to know the workbook name. So really, we're just working through these 3 parameters that we have here. So the workbook name as string. The next line is then the sheet name as string. Then the last item is the PDF file path as a string. And now we're going to pass those into our VBA code, which will be workbooks. So we always start with for this automation machine, we always start, I say always start, when we're working with Excel workbooks, we always start at the workbook level. So workbook name, our sheets will then be our sheet name. And then we want to export as fixed format. Let's check my notes for that. Yes, export as fixed format. Type is going to be an Excel type PDF. This is the stuff that if you use the macro recorder, this is the information that will be generated for you automatically. All we really need to get is the file name parameter. And we're going to set that equal to our PDF file path. So we've passed those 3 parameters into this cog, and then we've used them in our piece of VBA code. Finally, we want to close our Excel workbook. It just has 1 parameter, and let's use that. So workbook close. And then we can use the close step on that. So we've now built out 6 individual programs that all do one thing. They do them reasonably well. I mean, there's no error checking in there. We're missing some of the more advanced features that we might want, but in its simplest terms, that's what we've achieved. Now, at the moment, we have the cogs, but we don't have any machine around it. We have nothing to bring them all together to make them work. So let's build this bit. Oh, get in the right place. So let's now build out the part that is the machine that brings all these elements together. We're going to call this run automation. So sub run automation. So the first, how this is going to work, for this example, there's loads of ways you could build this out, is that we're going to select a cell inside this range. When we run our macro, it's going to select the entire range, and then it's going to go to cell number 2 and then work down this range of cells. It's going to go to that row, and then the next row, and then the next row, and then the next row, and then next, and then next. And each time it's going to run each of our individual programs. So we need to start with our range. So dim range, let's create a range variable as range. And now we're going to allocate the range that we've got to that variable. So rng set, I need to use set, rng equals selection dot current region. Next, let's now count how many rows that we've got. So dim row count as long. This will count how many rows we have. So row count equals rng dot rows dot count. So far, when we run this machine, as it were, what's going to happen is it's going to find all of that range, and it's going to count how many rows we've got. We then want to loop through this so that we look at each row individually. So let me create a variable or a counter. So my count will be I as long. And we're going to go for I equals 2, because if you remember, here's our range, but we're going to start at row number 2. And we want to go to 2 until we get to the row count. So here we've got, and is that 7 rows? We're going to start at row 2 and then go to the 7th row of that range. So a simple for loop, as we might have in VBA. Now let's add our first element. Let's call our first cog, as it were. Actually, no, we're not quite ready for that. First of all, we need to get the information about our actions and our parameters. So let's create a variable called action. Dim action as string. And then my action is going to be equal to my range dot cells. And then I want I, so that's whatever item in the loop we're on, and column 1. So if we look at that MSG box, and let's just call our action. So when we come in here, I've selected the cell. When we run this macro, what should happen is it comes up, it says open, it then moves to change cell. The next one will then be refresh data, save, PDF save, and then close. We just save this workbook while we're here. So we know what actions we've got inside each row. Now let's get the parameters that we need to use. parameters. So we're still going to use our range.cells. We want whatever row we happen to be on, and then column 2. Now the problem here is that, so the first line, that's fine, but here we actually have 4 parameters inside this one cell. So therefore we need to break this value up into an array or a list of individual items. For that, we can use the split function. So we're going to split this, and we've used line breaks. So line breaks are char 10 in VBA. That's how you define a line break. So now we've created our action variable and our parameters variable, and parameters includes a list which has each row in our cell individually. Now we're ready to call our first cog. So we're going to use something called select case. Now select case is just a large if statement. It's a bit more like a switch function that you might find in Excel. So and select. So we're going to check whether, so we're checking whether action, so if you remember, action is the value that we get from our first cell. So if action is equal to the word open, what do we want to do? Well, we want to run our workbook open macro. And in that, we want to pass across the first value that we have, and that is parameters and value 0. So when we have an array in VBA, it starts counting at 0, so 0 is the first item. So let's see if this will work. We need to close my monthly inventory report. I'll close that. Let me just save this. And actually, let's create a button on here, shall we? Let's insert a shape. I'll put it anywhere. Will this run? And then we will assign a macro, and that's our run automation. So now, okay, that I haven't defined a parameters variable. Dim parameters and variant. See if there's anything else wrong in my code. Parameters, parameter. I spelled parameters wrong anywhere else. Wouldn't surprise me. Okay, so that has now run and opened up our Excel workbook. So all that's done is it's gone through, it's picked up our first action, and it's then executed our first macro. Technically, it's then gone through all of our other steps, but we haven't yet added those cogs into our machine. So when we click run, it's just going to read those cell values and do whatever we need it to do. So now when we come back to VBA, we can now add in all of our other cogs. So case, so it is change cell. And if that's the case, we want to use the run, I want to run the change cell macro. And we need to pass across parameters. Actually, let me copy this. My chance of spelling parameters right 4 times is slim. So we've got our 4 parameters, and we're going to pass them all across in turn. Right, so the next item we have is refresh data. So let me copy that code there, and we'll reuse that. So if the text is refresh data, we're going to run our refresh data macro. And we just have 1 parameter for that. The next cog we need to build is our save. So that was called, what do we call that? Workbook save. So we're going to run it was just called save on the sheet, wasn't it? It was called workbook save in here, workbook save. And we just need that 1 parameter. Next, we want to save a PDF. We called that PDF save. So we're just picking up the values from here. And actually, let's go from there. So our macro for that was called PDF save. We want parameters 0, 1, and 2, because we had 3 lines for the information that we needed to pass across. And then finally, we had our step, which was close. So we have workbook close, and we just need a single parameter for that. Right, let's save this. And now let's see if this process will work. So how do we know whether this works? Well, what we should see is in our support files folder, we should have a PDF created that has the date of, let me just left align that, the 31st of August 2022, unless I've made any typos, but let's see. So let's open up that workbook. There you go, the information just saved. I have got a typo somewhere. Let's see where I've got that wrong. PDF file path. Workbooks, workbook name, sheets, sheet name, export as fixed format. So what, I'm going to go to my notes and just copy in the, rather than to solve my typo. And then we will just grab this piece of code here. Okay, let's try this again. Let's close this workbook. Let's hit run. So there we go, that appears to have worked. Let's have a look. In our folder, we have our monthly inventory report as a PDF. That opens up, so that has now gone through and saved that file as a PDF. Let's just add a message box at the end here so we know when it's complete, MSG box, and we'll just use the word done. Right, so then all we need to do is anytime we need to change any parameters, we can change that to September 2022, can then run our step. Let's go through, you saw that change there. I'm in my PDF. Let me just end that. So I'm in it at the moment. That's never going to work. Let's close this. Right, now when we run it, it will create the PDF. Fantastic. So now we've created this machine that has these cogs. Now you might think, well, so far all we've done is automate one thing. But here's the point, right? We've now got a sheet which contains all of the parameters that we need. So now if we have another workbook that we need to automate, we can just change our parameters in here and click run. That will then do the same thing with that process. Equally, let's say we didn't want to save a PDF for a process. That's fine. We could just delete that step. We could click run and that would run through that process. So we can build lots and lots of cogs that we use inside our overall machine. So we've built 6 so far. You can build hundreds and then you can list them out in the order that you want them. Now we could have changed some of these orders. We could have put the PDF save before the save, but the order matters, right? First of all, we need to open the workbook, then change the cell, then refresh the data. The save of whether you save the PDF or save the workbook first doesn't matter, but then we need to close. So we've built a machine which we can now use. We can keep adding more and more sheets on here and we can run through these automations. Now we just delete that sheet and I'll save that workbook. Now let's come back to our presentation. So we've seen our example initially as to how we build out this machine initially. Now you might be thinking, this sounds quite like Power Automate. Power Automate, you list out the steps, and it goes through, and then you create your automation process. And to some degree it is, and to some degree it's not. So the elephant in this room, isn't this just Power Automate in Excel? Well, let's take a look at that, shall we? So if we use Power Automate online, here's a list of the actions that we have for working with Excel. We can have tables and worksheets. But if we want to do anything with pivot tables or charts or anything else, we need to use run script. So even though Power Automate is a low-code, no-code environment, we've got to write a lot of scripts if we want to use pivot tables or charts or lots of other elements in Excel. There's nothing around PowerPoint or Word or Power Query. How about Excel Desktop, also Power Automate Desktop? Well, there's actions for launching Excel, working with some worksheets, reading, writing data. We can do some formatting in terms of column widths. We can activate and we can select things, but ultimately we have our catch-all action of run Excel macro. So again, even though Power Automate Desktop is a low-code, no-code environment for Excel users, we're going to have to write a lot of macros to work with pivot tables and charts and PowerPoint and Word and Power Queries. So either way, we've got to write these macros. So what my view is that actually Power Automate is built to use Excel. So if we use Power Automate, we can use Excel inside that process. But Power Automate is not built for Excel users. Okay, it's a low-code, no-code environment, but we've still got to write all of those macros ourselves to work with Power Automate in the right way. So that means that every tool that we build in our automation machine, we can use with Power Automate. So what we're doing is we're not just building Power Automate in Excel, we're extending the capability of Power Automate. So here I've got an example. I've built out a Power Automate process already, and it already picks up, let me make sure that I close this. And this Power Automate process, so we're going to launch Excel, that's our first step. It'll open up, we're going to launch Excel, that's the file that we've got saved. We're then going to activate sheet 1. We're then going to select a cell inside Power Automate, and then we can run our automation machine to the macro that we want to run, which was run automation. And then we close Excel. So that means that we can use our automation machine inside Power Automate. Let's take a look at that. So if I click run, Power Automate will now go and run the automation machine that we just built ourselves. Now, it doesn't run quite as fast as Excel by itself, but hopefully it should run. There we go. It's opened up a new instance of Excel. It's now opened up our automation machine. Remember, it's running sheet 1. If we had other sheets in here, we could run sheet 2, sheet 3, whatever we happen to declare inside our automation machine. It's now refreshing Power Query. It's taking its time. There we go. It's publishing that PDF. Should bring up the done. Fantastic. So that has now run our automation machine process. And if we look there, we should see the monthly inventory report. So 31 minutes past midnight. So that's the time that we've just had. So that ran our automation machine. So therefore, hopefully you can see that what we're doing is that even if you're using Power Automate, what we're doing here is extending the capability of that so that Power Automate is more for Excel users. We're going to have to build these macros anyway. Let's build them in this reusable way. So the third part of what we're looking at is what's possible. So we've spent time just building out a simple machine with simple processes, but how far can we take this? How far can we push it? Well, to show this, what I'm going to do is show you our automation machine. So the automation machine that is the one that I use, which we've built. We call it the Automation Toolkit. Let's look at an example in here. I'm just going to zoom in a bit so you can see what's here. I do need my other workbook open, so let me just open that. That was our example in there. Right, so now open up that workbook. There we go, it's just opening up there. Enable macros. Things are starting to run a little bit slower, don't know why. So here's our automation machine. And it has, I don't know, maybe 100 actions in there at the moment. So it has things of working with the automation itself. We can control calculation modes. We can control Power Query refreshes. We can change cell values, cell formulas. We can run macros. We can change that header and footer section of a page. We can save PDFs. We can change pivot table filters. We can change Power Query settings. We can add sheets and delete sheets, move sheets. We can print sheets. We can add protection, remove protection, rename sheets, change visibility, change slicers. We can open workbooks, close workbooks, protect them, save them. We can work with files and folders. We can move them, open them, copy them. We can do the same with folders. We can zip. We can unzip. We can send Outlook emails. We can work with PowerPoint, so we can update links and break links and copy and paste from PowerPoint into Excel. We can rename slides and find out which slides contain various objects. We can duplicate slides. There's lots of stuff in there. We can even work with Word. We can open and close Word documents. We can save them. We can update links, save PDFs. There's lots of stuff that we can do with PowerPoint and Word and Excel and files and folders. And all of this are pre-made actions made inside our Automation Toolkit, which is our automation machine. So what we're going to do is show you, once we have this toolkit already built, how easy is it to build a process? And let's look at the process that we've previously worked with. So the process that we previously created, I'm just going to copy that information from there, and then I'm going to paste it into our sheet over here. So rather than our variables being at the top, they're now on the right-hand side. So the first step we want to do was to open our Excel workbook. I'll search for the word open. And then in here, we can Excel workbook open, and then we'll add the action. Next, we want to change a cell value. Excel cell change, and then we'll add that action as well. Next, we want to refresh data. Then we'll add that. See, my Excel's starting to run a bit slowly, but that's fine. So we'll then use save. Excel workbook save. We'll add that step. We'll then get the PDF save. So Excel PDF save. Add that action. And then finally, we want to close our workbook. We'll find close. Then in there, we have Excel workbook close. There you go. We've got our 6 steps in there. All we need to do now is plug in our variables. Now, because of how we've set up our toolkit here, we can use parameters rather than linking to cells. So we have our parameter names here. So if we want to open up an Excel workbook, what do we need? Well, we need our folder path. And in here, when we use variables, we can put those in curly brackets, and we need the file name. Here you can see the additional parameters that we've added onto each of these actions. So we've got actions for read only. So I don't want to read only. I don't want to update links. I don't have a file open password, and I don't have a file modify password. So you can see that when we start to build out these further, we can add these additional options so that our program that does one thing and does it well has all the options built in that we might possibly need. Next, we have Excel change cell. For that, we just need the file name. What's the sheet name that we want? That's called settings. Now, this sheet name, it could have been a parameter that we had on the right-hand side. That could have been, we didn't set it up like that. That's fine. Reporting date. What do I want to change? Do I want to change the value in that cell or the formula? I want to change the value. and I want to set that value equal to the date. What I might do just to make that clearer is just to set this date as the, let's go the 31st of October 2022. Then we have our Excel data refresh. So for that, we just need our file name. What do we want to refresh? Well, I'm going to refresh everything. So therefore, I don't need to know what sheet it's on or what the object name is. But as you can see, there's extra steps in here that we could reference a specific pivot table or a specific query if we wanted to refresh it. Next, we have the file name that we want to save. So that'll be file name. That's the name of our variable. So when we use these variables, all it's doing is picking up the information in these cells over here. So file name will therefore pick up this value here. We're going to save this workbook. Because we're saving it, we don't need to save it with a different file path, and we don't need to save it as a different file type. But with that step, we could save things as CSVs or other types of files. Excel PDF save, so that's going to be file name. What's the name of the sheet that we want to save? That's going to be report. And what's our PDF path? That is folder path. And then file name. And then finally, Excel workbook close. We just want to show our file name. Now, how do we know that these variables are being passed across? So for example, if I click on Excel workbook close, and I look at our info button, you can see that it's passing across our monthly imagery report.xlsx, which is the value that we get from our variables section. Right, let's build that out. Assuming I haven't got any typos, let's click run on this process. It just took us a couple of minutes to build. Okay, that's now creating that PDF. Okay, 15.75 seconds. I'm a bit disappointed with that. I think it might be because Teams is running. Often I can get that under 7 seconds, but never mind. That's good. 15.75. I won't complain at that. And therefore, all we need to do is change our parameters if we want to create a different PDF. But let's just check to make sure that oh, I didn't create a PDF. Yes, it did. There it is. No, it didn't. What did I do wrong? Got a typo somewhere. What files? I know why. I need to change that to PDF name. Right, let's try and run that again. Hopefully that hasn't broken everything, although it might have done. Let's run that again, see if that will work. So that's now running through. There we go, it's creating our PDF. Our process is done. Let's take a look. Now we have our PDF. And there is our report for October. Now you might be thinking, well, what happens if we don't really want to have this worksheet visible? What happens if instead we might want to create a user interface, for example? So let's take a look at that. So let's say that we want to build a simple user interface, and it doesn't get much simpler than just say passing across the one parameter that we need. So this is just an example of how far we can push this automation machine idea. So the date, let's make this the 30th of the 11th, 2022. I'm going to use a separate example that I've got here. So this is exactly the same as the example that we previously worked on. We're just going to select our date. I'm going to point that to our interface sheet. So now whatever value we put into our interface sheet, that will then run with that date. But we need a way of triggering our macro. So I'm going to go to Insert and create a shape. Let's go for an icon. Let's use the play icon. So I'll select that and click Insert. There we go. We have our play icon there. I'm going to assign this as a macro. And in our automation machine, we have a special macro that's called Cool Automation Shape. I'll select that. And then using the name of the shape, I can declare what macro or what automation I want to run based on the sheet name. So example, so sheet example space 1A. So when I click this, it's going to run example, the sheet on example 1A. So that means I don't even need this sheet visible. And click hide. So my sheet isn't visible. None of my sheets are visible at the moment. There we go. So now a user comes in, they can change the date on there, they can click refresh, they can click run. This will then go and find that worksheet. It will update this process, run that through. You can see that updating, and then create our PDF. Let's just give that a few seconds to work through. There we go. So that has now completed. If we take a look, we can see, so 11 or 44 minutes past midnight, that's the time that PDF was created. Now, what happens if we don't want to use a cell-based value? What happens if instead we want to use a kind of a what's called an input box? Well, let me copy this shape. Copy that. We've got that in example 1B, so that means I can just call a different shape. So now when we click on this button, it's going to run the automation on sheet example 1B. And in this example, what it does is it asks us what date we want to run our automation for. So 30th of the 9th, 2022, for example. And then we click OK, and it then runs that process all over again. But this time it's asked us for that input box at the start of our process. Just give this a few seconds to run through again. So now we've seen, we've kind of seen this example, we've worked through it, and we've thought about how we can, so we've thought about how we build this out, this automation machine at the start. You can then see that if you have these, if you have this machine already built, you can easily create these processes. But let's just have a look at another example. So here, a second example that we've got is, let's just open up these files here. So the second example that we're going to work through is what happens if you have a budget report or something else, a report that you prepare on a regular basis. So let's have a look at our PowerPoint over here. So here's the report that we want to create. You can see here, so PowerPoint's running a bit slowly at the moment. I think it must be Teams. So that's the report that we want to create. The only problem is that every month we start with a single file. That looks like this. So we have pretty much an empty file, but we start with this financial data inside Excel. So we might have a sheet with our balance sheet on it. We might have a sheet with our P&L. We might have a sheet with our charts, but they're all in different parts of Excel. So can we create an automation machine to handle this? The answer is yes, we can. So here I've got a simple table. What do we want to, what date is our report? I'm just going to call this September 2023, for example. So we've got a table that says from this Excel workbook, from this sheet name, we zoom in on this a bit, that might help, whether it's a range or a chart, what the name of that range or chart is, and then place it onto this PowerPoint presentation, onto this slide, where the top and the left are declared as per those values, and then we have a width and a height, and we're going to paste that as a picture. So there's lots of different paste types that we have. We're pasting this as a picture. and this uses this action here. So PowerPoint object from Excel paste. So it takes whatever object we have in Excel, I'm just going to paste it into PowerPoint. So let's see if this will work. Let me close these PowerPoint presentations. Leave my financial data open, and then let's just click run and see if this will run correctly. You can't see it because it's happening on my other screen. That doesn't help anyone, does it? So that's now opened that up. It's now going to place those objects inside PowerPoint. As I said, I think because Teams is running and various other things, it's running slower than we would normally expect. But it is going to paste in all of those objects one by one into whatever position that we wanted to place it in. So that's done. So we can easily create these kind of PowerPoint presentations and other elements. Let's just have a look at one more example of this. Let's say that the next step we wanted to take was not just to create this PowerPoint presentation, but we also want to save that PowerPoint presentation as a PDF. We want to open Outlook to create an email. We then want to close that presentation and then display a message. So we're going to show this with Outlook as well. What I might do is just close this workbook. I might close Excel and see if we can open it up and get a bit more speed. Let me just close that as well. So now let's go back. I want my financial data open, and I also want the automation. Example, there we go. So let's just open those up, see if we can make this run at correct speed. Okay, so we should be finishing about the next 5 minutes or so. I think Teams is still playing havoc, but let's go with it. So now when we run this, we click run. It's now going to run this process again by copying the open up PowerPoint. Again, that's opening up on the other screen. So I'm going to place all those objects individually into PowerPoint, but then it's going to save our PowerPoint as a PDF. Once it does that, it's then going to create an email and attach that PDF to that email. And all of this is because we've already built out our automation machine with all of these steps and cogs already available in there. So let's just have a look at this example here. Now, in terms of working with PDF, also with PowerPoint, there's two ways that we can work with PowerPoint. There's either we can work with PowerPoint by placing objects individually, or if we have linked objects from PowerPoint or from Excel into PowerPoint, we can then update those links from PowerPoint into or from Excel automatically into PowerPoint. So as you can see, Outlook is now opening up. It's now creating an email, hopefully. There it has. So it's created an email for us with our PDF attached that we've just created inside PowerPoint. So you can see that we can take this PowerPoint creation step even further and start using emails as well. So now let's just take this another step further. Yeah, right. So what happens if we can look at this in different ways? So we've now, in our example workbook, we've now got two workbooks or two automations that will work. So what we can do, I won't show this in full because of time, but for example, I know over here we've got example 1B and example 2A. So now if we want to, we can create a data validation list. So again, this is about creating a user interface for somebody to work with who's not necessarily going to have access or see our automation process. And then we can, so I can select an automation in there. I can then insert another shape, just as we did before when we had that cell that was linked. We can now set this up so that it links to a specific dropdown. Let's call this search for the play icon again. I'll insert that. There we go. We'll allocate that as a macro. We'll call it the cool automation shape. And before, when we used a shape to run that macro, if you remember, we had our parameter in one of our cells. This time, we've got the name of the sheet that contains the automation machine or the automation recipe that we want to run. So if we have that scenario, we can use range colon and then C3. And what that means is that when we click that button, it will run whatever automation we have listed in there. Because of time, I'm not going to run that, but that will work. There's one other thing to show you. And that's the fact that if we go to unhide, what you'll see is that we have a worksheet called ribbon. So this is hidden inside this tool already. And at the minute, at the top, we don't have any ribbon visible, but we have a secret ribbon already built into our machine. So we can turn these, let me zoom in on this so you can see what's going on. So we said, right, let's turn on our ribbon. Let's turn on our group. Let's turn on our button. So button 000 and button 001. And we'll call this example 1 and then example 2. We can select the size of the buttons. Let's make one large, one small. And then the name of the sheet that we want to run. So example 1B, and then example 1 goes to 2A. So when we click refresh, if you look at the top, there you go, Automation Toolkit, that's the name of the label. So that's suddenly appeared. When we click that, we now have our custom ribbon. So if we create a new sheet, let's hide all of our other sheets. We have a custom ribbon. So even though the sheets are hidden, we can still work with those. I can click example 1. It's going to say, what report do we want to run? Let's go for the 31st of August 2022. I'll click OK, and now that's going to run that automation process based on the buttons in the ribbon. Now, because these are in the ribbon and all of our sheets are hidden, it means if we wanted to, we could save this workbook as an XLAM, so it would become an Excel add-in. So therefore, we can create our own Excel add-ins using this just by saving the file as an XLAM. All our worksheets are hidden in an Excel add-in anyway, so therefore that process would operate fine. You can see that publishing as a PDF. I've got a message box coming up, automation complete. And if you remember for that one, we're in support files, I think. And what time is it? It's so 57 minutes after midnight. And there you go. That's that file there that has just been created. So that is our automation machine that we can run using user interfaces, using ribbons, using creating our own add-ins if necessary. So coming back to our presentation originally, what's possible? Hopefully you can see that once we've built out this machine, There's a lot that's possible because everything is already built and set up. So let's wrap up. My goal today was to show you that an Excel-based automation machine is the key to quickly building automation processes. We're using these same processes over and over again. Open an Excel workbook, change a cell value, refresh a query, whatever they happen to be. So if we build them once and we build them well, and those machines do one thing well, then we can easily build out other processes just by adding text into a cell. So we started off by saying, what's the one thing you can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? And I said, for me, it was automating Excel. But the key second question is, what would it look like if it were easy? Hopefully you've seen today that actually we can start building out these machines quite quickly, often just using single lines of VBA. Obviously, when you start working with PowerPoint and other applications, we need more lines and more information on there. And we need to think about how we might handle errors. But equally, it doesn't have to be hugely complex because we've broken down each piece individually. So for me, I say if you teach someone Excel, they can have a job for life. However, if you teach someone to automate Excel, they can have a life. And that person was definitely me back in 2015. So just about if you can just give me one more minute to talk about our training program. If you'd like to try out our automation toolkit, you can. It is part of our training program. In our training program, you have courses on so Excel automation secrets, so tables, Power Query, Power Pivot, Office scripts, Excel skills boost is a general Excel program. We have tools. That's our automation toolkit. That's what we've just seen. Power Query Quick Steps is a custom functions library for working with Power Query, so that if you have some tricky transformations, that makes it easy. We have other tools available, masterclasses. In fact, we've got John Peltier coming in 2 weeks' time to talk about charting best practices. We've got an ebook library, so you can download ebooks from our ebook library. There's Q&A, live member calls, and also a support forum. So if you're interested in joining our membership program, that's what you get. You get our automation toolkit in there already, so you can have a go and play with that yourself. The monthly pass is $49 a month, or we have a special offer at the moment at $392, which is a 12-month pass. And that's all available at exceloffthegrid.com/academy. And that's the end. So we were, definitely over an hour, so apologies for that. But thank you everyone for sticking around. Let me have a look at the chat to see if there's any questions in there.
Mark, I've been monitoring and I didn't see any questions. Mostly it's people saying things like amazing, awesome, thank you. So well, like,
and they are right.
The tool.
Yes.
Oh, wait a minute. We just got one. Sue is asking, would or could this work if the Excel document with automation is stored on Teams or SharePoint for use by a large team?
So the answer is, so it's all, it works if the files are synced back to your local PC. So yes, it can work if you've got local syncing back. So it has to work with local drives and local connections. So it doesn't reach out into your SharePoint environment online. So it has to be synced back. So yes, it can. However, the biggest issue with using SharePoint is often so our tool, so your automation machine will run faster than SharePoint can run. That's normally the issue. So often if you have a file, something that renames a file, what will happen is that when you try and open it, Excel will try and open that file, but it'll go to your SharePoint version, which hasn't yet got its file name changed, and then it will try and open that version, so it gets confused around file names. That's the biggest area where we have issues around working with SharePoint, is the fact that it runs faster than SharePoint can sync. So yes, it can work with that if you have a local, if it's synced locally. So everything around today was on OneDrive, so that was synced to my OneDrive folder and syncing as we were going through. But yeah, it's the same issues that you might have with a macro as normal.
And Mark, Kevin asked at 8:01, I have a question. Do you disable background refresh first in VBA for Power Queries? I use similar approaches in making a report runner, but not as many steps as in the demo example. For Power Query refresh, in the process, I seldom use refresh all. I usually use controlled sequence for the associated Power Queries. For the pivot tables or charts from pivot table, I often disable background refresh first in VBA to avoid pivot table refreshes before feeding the Power Queries.
So to answer your question, Kevin, the answer is yes. So to make sure that your process runs correctly, you do need to disable your background refresh in Power Query. Now there is a step inside our so we have an action that means that you can, before you run anything, so before you refresh your queries, you can run that action that then disables your background refresh. So that means that even if your workbook isn't set up for background refresh, you run your cog, as it were, to disable that background refresh, so that when you then refresh, it refreshes sequentially. Because otherwise, what happens is that you refresh and VBA doesn't know that you've finished that process. So yes, you would need to do that for this entire process to work, but that's the same as if you were running any macro that uses Power Query. You'd need that to be disabled, or else VBA doesn't know when that item has finished refreshing.
And Mark Newton Oliveri, right after you said about that line drawing, about if anybody knew who did it, that you would credit them, he put into the chat a link to the source, which he said is XKCD, and then he has a link to it. So you go looking for it quite early.
I'll have a look at that. Thank you very much. And if you're the original artist, thank you for letting me use it, although you didn't really. So yes, so thank you for that. That is the source. Thank you for sharing that in the chat. I will use that going forwards.
Yeah. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
You mentioned Power Automate Desktop and Power Automate Online, I guess it's called. So just wanted to understand and help clarify for anyone with the same question. So if we want to run a VBA macro, we need to use Power Automate Desktop?
If you want to run, so if you want to run any VBA macro, excluding everything else I showed you there, if you want to run any VBA macro in Power Automate, you have to use Power Automate Desktop. You can't use Power Automate Online. If you have a premium license, you can trigger a process in Power Automate Online that will then, assuming your PC is on, will then run your Power Automate Desktop process that will then run that macro. So you can sync these things up to work with your Power Automate Online like triggers, but it's all about the
licensing.
It's all about the licensing. So you need a premium license to enable that to happen. So I'm guessing most people would not have a premium license unless their company is really heavily involved in Power Automate. And even then, an Excel end user, would they have a Power Automate license? Maybe, maybe not. It's difficult to know. So I think that's the so yeah. But to actually run that macro, it would be Power Automate Desktop.
And what about Office scripts? Does it need to be the online Power Automate version, or it can be both?
So Office scripts only run with Power Automate Online. Power Automate Desktop does not have any triggers. Doesn't have any triggers at all for running Office scripts at the moment. So if you've got an Office script and you're running Excel Desktop, then that's not going to work with Power Automate Desktop at the moment.
So kind of a puzzle. Okay. Thank you, Mark. It's really amazing the tool that you've been building over the years. I think you presented this a while back at the Vancouver Meetup group, right?
Yes. So at the Vancouver Meetup, so that was 18 months ago or so. I presented the version which I'd kind of used and developed, and since kind of launching this to our Academy members and getting their feedback. We've kind of built it out further, and that's great things. So the version that we have now is based on lots of feedback. I can see that in the chat, Tanya's mentioned the Environ VBA value that you can get to get your to get the path of where your SharePoint files are stored. So now using our this tool, it now can get that value from your environment function. So we take that feedback and we add actions in as people ask us to, really, because it's kind of it's a community tool for us. So if there are actions that need to be added, then we'll see how we can add those and help our members to automate their processes.
How does it happen to get the toolkit updated? So a user gets, it's an Excel file, they get
Yes.
that Excel file, but then you create new actions. How do they get those into your
so that
toolkit?
was one of the key areas that we looked at in terms of feedback from members, because so it's built in the way that so if you have an automation process that runs and works, that is self-contained inside that Excel workbook. So if there's a new version of something, it doesn't impact anything that you've previously built. So if you're on version 2, for example, your Excel workbook on version 2 will keep running on version 2. If we release version 2.1, well, you can then go and get a new template on version 2.1. There's no need, if you're happy with version 2, you don't need to change version 2 to upgrade to 2.1. That one can still run in isolation by itself. It can keep running. Version 2.1 might have some new actions and other things, but you can then go and get 2.1 and then build up a new process. But you don't need to update 2 to 2.1. You can stay on that old version, and therefore you don't have those issues around updates and forcing updates, and what happens if we change one of the signatures to one of our actions. It means that it doesn't break any previous actions. That was one of the key areas that we really had to try and get hold of over the last kind of 18 months or so, is how do we handle that in a way that causes the smallest amount of disruption to people, because when it's just me running a tool, it's fine, isn't it? Because if I know that I've made a change, therefore I can go in and make changes elsewhere where things have changed. But for somebody else, we need something that will run and continue to run and run reliably, so even if there's updates, it doesn't impact anything you've previously done.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Anyone wanting to say hello to Mark or make a comment? Just take the last few minutes.
You can see the chat. Kevin's asked, do you use Microsoft Task Scheduler to automate tasks via VB script? So the answer is you can use Task Scheduler to automate tasks via VB script. Although I would say you don't have to use Task Scheduler, so you can, or you don't have to use a VB script. You can run Task Scheduler to open up an Excel workbook, and then on the workbook open macro, you can then get it to trigger other actions as well. So I have done in the past, Kevin. The truth is, at the moment, I don't need to run things at specific times. But if you need to run macros at specific times, then yes, you could use Task Scheduler, and yes, that will work with our with the toolkit that we've just shown. And also you could use that with even your basic automation machine. You could use that with Task Scheduler. There's a couple of quirks in terms of the settings that you need to apply, but yes, that is possible.
All right. Do you want to share again where people can find you and connect with you, Mark?
Yes, let me just bring up my slide.
If there are any other questions, let us know. We are wrapping up.
I had a slide there with my details.
And thank you for staying.
I put it in the chat as well.
Perfect. So there's hopefully it should come up on the screen. So there's my contact details. I'm reasonably active on LinkedIn at the moment. So I'm trying to add some value into LinkedIn. So hopefully you can find me over there. You can contact me directly. So yes, that's everywhere where you can find me.
Thank you. And thank you for staying up late.
What are you talking about? It's only 12 minutes past 1. The night is yet young, or more to the point, the morning is yet young.
Yeah, now you go to party the rest of the night, right? Okay, thank you so much again, Mark, and thank you everyone who joined us live. Please allow us a couple of days to put the video together for you, and we will send out the email with all the resources that Mark will provide us, and the PDF, the presentation that you saw at the beginning with all that information about the event and resources. You can also download that from the link that we will send. And that's it. If there are not any further questions, let's see if there are. Just thank yous there. I will stop the recording. Thank you so much, everyone, for being with us today.
Thank you,
See?
Mark.
Thanks, everyone.
Stop the recording.